Welcome. I'm Harlan Krumholz, current editor-in-chief of JACC, and today I have the pleasure of marking a moment of transition and of expressing deep gratitude. For more than a year after stepping down as editor-in-chief of JACC, Valentin Fuster continued to host the JACC podcast. He did this out of generosity. He did this because there are so many people that demanded that he continue. And despite the fact that his wife really wanted him to have freer weekends, he just contributed his time so that you all could continue to hear his voice and to follow JACC in this way. It's remained incredibly popular, reaching thousands and thousands, tens of thousands, many more around the world each week. It was really an impactful continuation of his legacy. And as we begin a new chapter, I wanted to take a moment to thank him, ask him a few questions, and honestly, just get a chance to talk to him. First of all, Valentin, you know, my profile raised so high because I followed the great Valentin Fuster in this role. And, I just want to thank you. You laid such a great foundation. It's such a privilege to be an editor-in-chief at JACC. And, I just couldn't thank you enough for all that you did during your 10 years of JACC.
Well, thank you for your comments, Harlan. But one thing I'm sure, you will make JACC better. And this is not just superficial comment. I know you very well. I know you are really on the right time. Things are moving along, and I think you are the ideal person. So congratulations, not only to be the editor, but again, I'm sure what is going to happen is JACC will be better.
Well, this is the arc of things. I mean, we should always be improving whatever we have, and no matter what, when the person follows me, they'll keep improving too. What you didn't tell me was, okay, I'm going to say how much work this takes. Like it's constant incoming. You didn't warn me. You didn't warn me at all. And you're able to juggle all these things. It's an invigorating, exciting position. But I don't know how did you find it? You were juggling so many things. It's a big job.
Well, I think first of all, you have to be very well organized. I think method is critical. Second, you need to have 2 or 3 goals, not 10 or 15, and be consistent. And because all of us contribute, at the very end, we contribute in 1 or 2 things. The question is, how do you choose them? And I think this is very critical in everything we do in our lives. It's a priority system. I think I know what I wanted from JACC. I wanted to be easy to read, easy to absorb. That's why I got into the central figure concept. And also on the podcast, people don't read so much today. So I had very few goals, and I think I was consistent with, and so that's.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't really believe you because honestly, you contributed in so many different ways, and it sort of seems anyway to the outside that you had many goals and were able to deliver on all of them. So anyway, just deep gratitude for what you did at the journal. But I want to talk a little bit about the podcast because when you reflected to me, you sort of said this was a labor of love. But I know that, gosh, you devoted so much time to this. And can you just give the listeners a little perspective on your process for preparing for the podcast each week? Because most people don't realize what goes into making something like this that's both rigorous and accessible. Can you share a little bit about how you approached it?
Well, first of all, I thought that the podcast was important because it's easy for people to listen and to retain rather than reading. So the process was complex. And I had to make a decision from the very beginning if I was going to do it or not. And the process took 15 hours every week about. And the way I handled it was starting early in the morning of Saturday by 5 o'clock, I guess, and early in the morning of Sunday. That's basically what it's all about. The problem with the podcast is you have to be sure that you do it well. You cannot just say things. So, and to be rigorous, to be fair, and to not to be biased. All these things are important. So, but I had a whole support from the college, and I kept going. And when you asked me to say, do you want to do another year? I didn't mind because I thought that was somehow had some success for the young people particularly. And that's the reason why I decided to, at least to continue for a while. But it was a big undertaking on a weekly basis.
Yeah, you helped me a lot because it was really good that this successful, excellent aspect of the journal continued in continuity, even as we were beginning to, begin a new term. I was personally appreciative. I'll tell you, I was sitting last night. We had a guest come, Michelle Kittleson, visited Yale, and we took her out to dinner last night. And I was sitting next to some of the faculty, and I was just asking them. I told them I was going to be talking to you today, and I said, "What do you think about the podcast?" There was, uniform positivity about your podcast, and the person sitting next to me was saying, I listen to it every week. By the way, that gave me some trepidation in this transition time, but it was such a nice thing to hear. So what do you think resonated so well with listeners? What is it do you think made it so successful? What's the secret to this podcast?
Well, I think expressing verbally concepts are easy to retain and to understand than just reading, which is a much more complex process. So I think I would say people like it to have the concept. There are three issues I'm going to be discussed that are important in this paper. 1, 2, 3. And at the very end, you repeat, these are the three processes, 1, 2, 3. And then comes another paper with an SGLT2 inhibitor for the second time on something else. You go back to what you said on the previous paper and you repeat. I think I want to be not arrogant to talk about success, but if it was any success, I think it was consistency. And that is every week there are many topics, but the topics repeat with a different aspect. Then you can go back and present that. And this repeating aspect, I think, has been absolutely critical. The fact that you mentioned the same topic on a different with a different objective, perhaps, but you repeat what was in a previous kind of article in JACC. And I think this concept is like how you mature on the business of cardiovascular disease by just repeating and adding every time you repeat and you add. And I think this was in my view, was the success.
I think one thing that struck me was people knew about the investment you were making, and all around the world, people who didn't know you in a personal way developed a personal relationship with you through this podcast. They looked forward to hearing from you every week. Your voice was familiar to them. They trusted the things that you said. And I think it was very important that you were making this investment yourself. Like you didn't hire a professional, actor to read content, but that you were connecting yourself in sharing your views. One thing I would ask you is, how did you think about the balance between reporting, so telling people what's in the issue, and interpreting, giving them your take on what that information was? How did you navigate that sort of balance? What did you think was the right balance?
Well, this reminds me of a discussion on CNN about 3 days ago after the McCarthy presentation in Broadway. And the question they were discussing is what a reporter is supposed to do and to express, to transmit to the public. And it was very interesting. And one thing is to just relate what is in the world. The other is to begin to interpret and giving your own kind of bias about it. And I think this is what you are asking. I did both, but I was saying always, this is the message that I carry home myself. And when I do this at the end of every podcast, it's just to tell them the facts were presented, but this is what I get myself. And I did this my message to carry home on every podcast, in being sure that before I presented the facts, afterwards I said, this is what I would do, and this is what I get. That people can actually decide, whether I am what I want to do is right or wrong, but at least I tell them. But the facts, the podcast that I decided to present every week were obviously were the facts presented there, not a bias or anything. It was at the end that I gave my interpretation. In my interpretation, my message to carry home never lasted more than 2 minutes, to be sure that I was not now getting into making an issue on a bias at all.
You're referring to the Broadway play Good Night, Good Luck, the George Clooney production of the Edward R. Murrow thing. And actually, that leads me to another question, because I also watched that. It was really a terrific presentation. To what extent do you think that, or how often, if ever, did you move into advocacy, where you saw something, you provided your interpretation, but you also had some call to action? You identified something that you thought we should do differently. As an editor-in-chief of JACC, did you see that as part of your role, and did you ever bring that into the podcast?
Yeah, I do. I think in a way, you are an educator. You are not only a transmitter. So, and when you get into education, you obviously have your own views. I was very sensitive to the international arena, for example. People have to realize that research in the United States is fantastic, but there are 3/4 of the world in which things are different, and they have a lot to offer in real life. So you express that, but you express it in a way that is very succinct and not trying to go over and over and over. So I personally think that JACC, in my view, is a great educational journal, and actually I'm very, very impressed the way you are doing it. And I think has to be, you are presenting what is important. You said you had 2 issues that related to lipids, for example. You can take other subjects, but these are critical issues today in the minds of everybody who treat patients, and so forth. You had an issue on heart failure, preserved ejection fraction, for example. You are already, in a way, deciding what is important, and that is, I think, this is our job. It's an educational job, but really prioritizing for the person, for the people, for the audience, what you think is important. So I think commenting on the CNN the other day, I think our job is to tell the facts, but within that context, we have to prioritize few things which I suspect are more educational for people to retain.
Yeah, and I think about building community and finding common values, and helping to motivate and cultivate discussions at points where there are disagreements, so that we can make progress together.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things is we're all trying to figure out how to best communicate science. There's a fast-changing media landscape. I was wondering if was there a time when you learned something in the podcast that then led you to change something or modify what you were doing? And what do you think is the key to effective communication in this era?
Well, one example is artificial intelligence. Just going into a subject that began to evolve into the journals a couple of years ago, very heavily. And well, at the beginning, I was quite skeptical. And the reason was that the data being presented were not really presented in a way that I could understand. That is, you come out with a formula, whatever it is, with AI, and you go into the journal and you say, well, the EKG is capable to tell you A, B, C, D. And you say how they got this information. Well, this was at the beginning. Then over time, over the last year or two, I have really got into artificial intelligence to understand better the concept. So I hope if I had, now that you are the editor, I think you are in a position now that to say, let me understand better how you did that, where this came from, and so forth, which I was not able to do at the beginning. So I think you change progressively, you get educated, and then you become demanding because you understand better the subject. This happened to me a lot in a number of subjects that, I could name that. For example, people began to talk about heart failure and preserved ejection fraction, and they were talking about ejection fractions of 45%. And I said, this doesn't make any sense. So I began to question all of that. And then now we have, mid, normal, or low, and at least things are changing. But you have to be critical when you don't understand it. And that to me is a role of an editor too. So I change over time, but I think I try to help also the community to change. And that is to become, you are more knowledgeable, and at the same time, you are more critical. And I think this happened constantly, by the way. I mean, this is from the beginning to the end. Subject after subject are evolving. And the way they evolve in general is in an extreme. You have to be very critical in that extreme. And then with time, you may become much more knowledgeable and perhaps critical too.
In your method on communication, take the podcast, for example, did you also evolve in your approach, or did you stay pretty well the same the whole time?
No, and this is, I think, is characterological on me. I'm very obsessive when I take a task. And sure, I change things, but not the method, which is what you're asking. The method has been from the very beginning at the very end, has been exactly the same. I may change the way I present, but no, I didn't. But I think this is a very personality kind of trait that positive or negative, I choose 2 or 3 things and I'm very consistent.
One of the things you've done so well is connect with people across the globe. What advice would you give people? Maybe what advice would you give me to really ensure that we can reach an international audience,
Yeah,
that medicine and science brings us together? And of course, people live in different contexts of their lives, their health systems, their worlds sometimes very different, and the geopolitics are complicated, as complicated as they've ever been. But what are you thinking now? What kind of advice would, let's say, give me
well,
about this?
yeah. Well, first of all, it was very difficult when I tried to develop a new journal that was JACC Asia. And the reason was exactly what you are talking about. I thought that the world has to be able to communicate better. And JACC Asia, in my view, has been a successful journal. I don't say you might have one like JACC Latin America or one JACC whatever it is, but at least giving this all the countries the opportunity to present in JACC. And I would, if I have to give you at least a view of what I would do, is to have every week some international section, every week consistently, in which people from around the world can express aspects that after being under an editorial judgment be presented. I think this would be my advice to you, is perhaps to create another journal or 2 that go to other parts of the world. This is always difficult and competitive, but perhaps in your own journal, I would have a section absolutely today that would be an international section in which people present their views after being judged by the editorials.
There's a thing I do, as I've taken the job and as I appreciate more what's going on, every once in a while I'll go, Fuster was a genius, because I start to recognize some of the things that you did and how they are making such a big difference. JACC Asia is a perfect example of this. I mean, I just think that was a blockbuster move. It was brilliant to put it in China. It was brilliant to choose Jianan Wang as the first editor. Jianan now is a member of CAMS, the Chinese Academy of Medical Sciences, which
I
is a
know.
very elite group, and is just, by the way, such a nice guy, so smart, and building bridges. And that journal is, as soon as it's doing well, but it's going to get its impact factor soon. And I just think that was I mean, there are many things, but yeah, it's a team. We come across something, they tell me, Dr. Fuster did it this way. And I'm going, yeah, I can see why he did that. That was brilliant. And this thing about JACC Asia, because it's not easy to start a journal, not
No.
easy to start a journal in another country, especially one where the U.S. has sort of back and forth relationships with. And what I'm trying to do with JACC is say we're not a U.S. journal, we're a global journal. But having that journal, that JACC Asia, I just really want to tip my hat to you about that. That was really many things you've done. That's just one of them that really made a difference. And it's continuing to grow. I think you're going to be really proud of what happens with that over the next several years. I mean, already you should be proud, but you will see it flower even more. That's going to be great to watch.
Well, thank you. Everything, once you make a decision, in general, there are lots of barriers. And what I would tell you, Harlan, is you will find many barriers on many things, but don't quit. You're a very stubborn guy. So fight. And I think the international issue is a very important one that you have to fight.
Yeah, you have to be persistent. Fortunately, we have such a great team at JACC, and Justine Turco, who's the Senior VP of Publishing, is just an extraordinary champion for making positive change.
Yeah.
Of course, Eileen Kavanaugh is the managing editor, all the folks that are working together. And it's just such a privilege. You and I have had a chance to work with the same team, so we know how good they are. So I just want to close up because we don't want to keep people on too long. So now that you're finally stepping away from the weekly podcast, and I will just say, your wife, Maria, is such an amazing person. But one of the first things she told me was, I want Saturdays with Valentin back. So, we had to negotiate this with her, this amazing person, Maria, and I'm sure she's going to be happy to get you back on Saturdays. But what do you think you'll do with this time? And any new projects on the horizon? Long overdue rest. I know that's not your way, but what are you thinking about if you get your Saturdays and early Sundays back?
Well, I think, as you know, Harlan, life is motivation. If you're motivated, you keep going. I have lots of research projects here. I have a center in Madrid.
Yeah, I know.
Which is the National Center of Cardiovascular Investigation.
That you've helped foster into a major force for science. It's been amazing to watch Sanique. Yeah.
So I go there every week. Actually, I leave this
still going every Thursday.
Yeah.
Wow.
This time is Wednesday.
Oh, Wednesday.
This week for another reason. No, but what I'm saying is that, look, family life is critical. Yeah, you touch into that, but it has been critical to me too. But certainly the Saturday is very early. This is why I started at 5 a.m. and so on Sundays, just to be sure that the family was protected somewhat. I think if you're asking me, now you will have time. Many people tell me, oh, now you are free time. Look, my friend, I have the research program. I have the book with Hearst, which is going to be constantly. There are not going to be an edition every 4 years. It's going to be every 6 months, constant change into what is new. And this is a big enterprise, very, very significant change in the editing of journals and so forth, or books, I would say. And then, I have a lot of hobbies. I am now very much into quantum physics, and you say you probably are getting crazy. But I want to tell you, I think we are in a new science other than artificial intelligence. It is absolutely critical. That is how people transmit thoughts and things at a distance without face-to-face. I believe in telepathy. I believe in a transmission, electronic transmission across the world, people and so forth. And I like you to finish to say, well, this guy maybe is crazy, but doesn't matter. I'm studying this. I'm already writing about it. And I think it's taking me some time, going from Max Planck in the 1900s to Einstein and to more recent physicists and so forth. So I am very busy and always trying to figure out the truth of things that we have in this world.
Well, you're so mission driven. You have such an active mind. You're such a contributor. You have such a legacy of so many people who've been inspired and follow your example. You're a role model to so many. Valentin, on behalf of the JACC community and our global audience, thank you. Your commitment to sharing science clearly and compellingly all the things you've done have made a lasting mark, and you're far from done. You've got much more to go. So we're deeply grateful for your dedication, your voice, your vision. Thank you for joining us today.
Final comment, you have a great team.
We
In
do.
JACC.
We do. Indeed.
A great team. You have that. I just want to emphasize that.
We do. We do. We do. And you know, you and I both know that success comes from not from individuals, but from teams working together, common mission, common goals, and not being deterred. Yeah, trying to do the right thing.
Absolutely. Thank you, Harlan.
Pleasure to see you. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.